There are a lot of events happening that I would like to tell you about. For example, about how European countries have quietly, almost imperceptibly, started to change their position regarding America's assistance in its fight against Iran. It's interesting to analyze the visit of the Japanese to the White House and their pledge of allegiance to Trump, the desire to definitely kiss the ring. But two huge events stand out, namely the confirmed rumors that Trump is planning to withdraw from NATO, and the Persian Gulf countries are joining the Abraham Accords, joining America and Israel to conduct military actions against the Iranian regime. I'll start today with a digest of what has happened over the past 24 hours, and then I'll move on to these epical topics. And finally, I'll tell you about New York, or rather about what's happening with the mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, his crazy fanatical wife, his friends and comrades, but not from the Democratic Party, as you might think, but from a global terrorist organization called Wherever You See an American, Kill Him There. And if you find out that he's Jewish, then put another bullet in him. So, the Daily Digest. The main events of the week. Well, naturally, the war involving Iran and Israel. Trump is threatening to blow up the gas field called South Pars. If Iran attacks Qatar again, then the United States will destroy the largest gas field on the planet. South Pars will be erased from existence. The war has been going on for 19 days already. 20. The Pentagon has requested additional funding of $200 billion from, naturally, Congress. Iran is launching drones and missiles at Israel, at U.S. bases. An American F-35 was damaged by Iranian fire. The pilot is safe and, thank God, unharmed. The U.S. is considering sending several thousand additional troops toward Iran. And the Senate has blocked the Democratic resolution to limit Trump's military powers for the third time. Gas prices are rising. They're rising. The price of oil has soared to $118 per barrel. Russia, as the largest exporter of oil and gas, is of course receiving additional income, but we'll talk about that later. The fear of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is growing. 44% of economists believe it will be closed for more than a month. On March 19th, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan signed a joint statement expressing their readiness to participate in efforts to ensure safe passage. The Army will be pipeline. This was reported to us by U.S. News and World Report. But there is an important nuance, a small nuance. The statement does not contain any specific commitments to send warships or other resources. Essentially, this is an empty political gesture meant to calm Trump down, as if he would be pacified by our words. He's not a fool, and he won't be pacified. And why calm him down? Not because he lashed out at the Allies for refusing to help secure the Strait. Again, we'll talk about this. France declared its readiness to help, but only after the situation stabilizes and the missile strikes stop. We don't need them at all after the military strikes stop. Then why do we need France with its warships if the military strikes will have already stopped? Well, they really must think we're complete fools. Germany expressed its own position. At first, this is not our war. We didn't start it. This is the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius. He said what Trump expects from the handful of European frigates in the Hormuz Strait, something the powerful U.S. Navy cannot do. Then we didn't start the war with Russia, right? And what can America do, being 8,000 kilometers away from Ukraine, if we follow that same logic? According to the Russian newspaper Izvestia, negotiations between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine have been suspended. The U.S.'s attention has shifted to Iran. Trump previously called the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict one of the main disappointments of his time in office. Russia, meanwhile, continues its attacks. The Iranian war benefits Moscow. Oil prices are rising. Western attention is being diverted. In the past 24 hours, 235 combat clashes have been recorded. Russia attacked the energy infrastructure of Zaporizhzhia. About 40,000 people were left without power, by the way. A shopping mall in Kyiv was damaged by a drone. Russia's total losses since February 24, 2022 amount to roughly, give or take a couple of people, 1,284,000 killed and wounded, but in February, for the first time in a long while, Ukraine regained more territory than it lost. Congratulations. The inflation forecast for 2026 has been raised to 2.7%. That means inflation is picking up again. Markets are falling. The Dow Jones lost more than 600 points. The Nikkei dropped by 3%. Gasoline prices in the U.S. have increased. Inflation is putting pressure on the budget. Buying a car or taking out a mortgage is more expensive. The probability of a recession in the next 12 months has risen to 31%. But Trump says, guys, as soon as we take care of everything in Iran, and he suggests it will take 2 to 3 weeks, we'll bring down the price of gasoline. It will be $60 per barrel. You'll see how all the other prices will follow it down. Well, he has said things many times where we've said, how can this be? And they came true. Well, how can this be? And we really hope that they will come true again. So the meeting with Trump keeps getting postponed. Trump said he wants to move it by a month or two because of the war with Iran. China has theoretically spoken out against this operation but is staying very quiet. Trump demanded that Beijing help unblock the Strait of Hormuz. So China really needs the Strait to be unblocked because they get a lot of oil from there, but they don't want to lose face. That's why they're not taking sides. A scandal is unfolding involving the resigned director of the U.S. Intelligence Department, Kent. Today he gave an interview to Tucker. I'm sure they both talked in unison about how good Iran is, how bad the Jews are, and how America chose the wrong partner. They shouldn't have chosen Israel, but Iran. I haven't listened to that interview yet, but I definitely will watch and listen to it. If there's anything really interesting, I'll let you know. By the way, the Department of Justice has opened a case against this very Kent because he is now suspected of leaking information to Iran through Tucker. Now let's move on to our main topics. The United States of America, the European members of NATO, the relationships within the alliance. Is it possible that America could abandon its so-called partners and leave them hanging out to dry? And isn't America trading Europe for the countries of, how should I put it, the Abraham Accords? In other words, hasn't the collapse begun of everything that was organized as a result of and after World War II? And is a complete shift in the balance of power on the planet taking place? In my opinion, it is. And this will affect everyone, well, each one of us. So question number 1. Is it true that Trump wants to leave NATO? And can the U.S. president make such decisions without Congress? Is there an alternative to Hormuz? What if I tell you that Hormuz might not even be needed at all? That it will be canceled? Who will cancel it? And who can actually do anything on this planet? A stupid, uneducated loser nicknamed Donald Trump. And sometimes he's also called the President of the United States. Everyone else is very smart, but they can't do anything.
After days of disobedience, after Germany said no, after France said none, after Britain said this is not our war, after each of these Western European welfare states declared that they rejected President Trump,
произошло нечто примечательное.
It's funny and not funny. They still pretend that they mean something, that their past makes them something special. They're actually just ridiculous remnants of past greatness.
and that's how the coalition in Hormuz became real. Watch this video until the very end because I'll show you not only how Europe is finally stepping up, but also how an entirely new regional architecture may have made the Strait of Hormuz as a choke point a thing of the past. You don't want to miss this. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot professor, here to help you make sense of this madness with breaking news and analysis you won't get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Be sure to hit the bell and the subscribe button. Now let me lay out the situation for you, because to understand just how dramatic this turnaround is, you need to know what happened just a few days ago. By the way, we talked a little about this in my first video today. This is a breathtaking turn of events, and the speed of it really tells you everything you need to know about who actually holds all the levers of influence in this new orbital order, as I call it. We're no longer dealing with a world order. We're literally dealing with a cosmic order. As Operation Epic Fury entered its third week, oil prices soared above $105 a barrel, and gasoline prices in London reached the equivalent of literally $8 a gallon. Trump addressed his NATO allies and said very simply, "Look, you benefit from the Hormuz Strait much more than we do. Europe gets 10% of its oil through this waterway. That's 5 times more than the US. Come and help us. It would be useful for us. We wouldn't mind. We don't need it, but of course it would help." And the response that Trump received was absolutely brazen in its arrogance and ingratitude. European countries, NATO allies, essentially stated, "No, this is not our war." In other words, to put it simply, the countries whose economies are directly threatened by the closure of the Hormuz Strait refused to lift a finger to open it. So this was the moment Trump honestly had been waiting for, and I mean that literally, because Trump's criticism of NATO was never emotional. It was always pragmatic. It was always consistent. For more than 10 years back in his first term, he called NATO obsolete. Not because he necessarily wanted to destroy it, but because he wanted to fix it, and he had 3 specific complaints. The alliance was created to fight the Soviet Union, an enemy that no longer existed. It hadn't adapted to new modern threats, and most member countries were, well, they were outright freeloaders. I can't even say it, blah, blah, blah. They are openly leeching off American defense spending, and so Trump used this situation in the Strait of Hormuz to turn to NATO and say, "All right, prove me wrong. Here's your chance. Show me that you really matter." And instead of disproving his words, NATO handed him exactly the ammunition he needed to justifiably bring down the transatlantic alliance. Take note.
I believe that NATO is making a very foolish mistake, and I've been saying this for a long time. You know, I've always wondered if NATO would ever be on our side, so this was a perfect test.
If everything is so complicated with this Hormuz, why not create an alternative?
So,
Here's the question that
Itak, that's the very question engineers and strategists have been asking themselves for decades. What if we just bypass this strait entirely? So take a look at this map. Oman has an amazing geographical feature. A small separated exclave called the Musandam Peninsula. It's a harsh, rugged mountain fortress that juts right into the Strait of Hormuz, and here's what's truly remarkable. In several places along the peninsula, the distance between the Persian Gulf on one side and the Gulf of Oman, and therefore the open Arabian Sea on the other side, is only a few dozen miles.
Trump is leaving NATO. The President of the United States does not formally have the right to decide whether to cancel membership in the alliance, or, as they say, to continue remaining a member, but the President of the United States can stop participating in exercises, in information exchange, and block military aid. And one more thing. The President of the United States can publicly declare that Article 5 of the alliance does not apply, because the alliance countries are not paying enough, or they are not doing something else that they were supposed to do under the agreement. Europe is actually in shock, and I would even say it's approaching a state of hysteria. The United Kingdom has started to form a coalition. It seems like it's to present it to Trump and say, "Well, Trump, we shared a little, or maybe not," or to get nervous, or something else silly like that. Unlike NATO, Saudi Arabia announced that it is joining Israel and the US in the war against Iran. Just think about that. The leading Sunni state in the world is about to form an alliance with the Jewish state. It will coordinate with and follow the orders of Jewish generals, with the goal of destroying the Muslim army and the Muslim leadership of its neighbors, the coalition of the children of Abraham. And if it's Saudi Arabia, then a number of countries in the region that have already signed the Abraham Accords will stand alongside it. And we will see the transformation of actions which are described as the seizure of an oil-producing state by the U.S. and Israel into a war of the Abrahamic coalition against its ideological opponent. And considering that yesterday Iran's closest friend and ally, Qatar, announced that it is breaking all ties with Iran, the attitude of Iran's neighbors becomes clear. Iran's strategy to intimidate everyone around has backfired.
Where the Shiite theocracy clashes with Sunni Jewish and Christian peoples who unite around a common Abrahamic identity. And as a result of this growing Abrahamic coalition, Iran has completely isolated itself from every country in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East. As you can see, this is a list of all the countries in the region that have called on Iran to immediately cease its hostile actions: Qatar, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. Iran is completely isolated. It has cut itself off from any diplomatic ties. Its indiscriminate strikes have turned former diplomatic partners into determined enemies, demanding the complete and permanent disarmament of Iran.
You understand that the first reaction of NATO countries was, "We're not involved," while the reaction of the Muslim world was, "Thank you for your help. We are with you."
In fact, the Wall Street Journal reports that the GCC countries, that is, the Gulf Cooperation Council, states Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, led by the UAE, now insists that any post-war settlement must completely neutralize Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missile arsenal, and its network of regional proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Iraqi militias. In other words, the only acceptable outcome of this war is an Iran so deprived of any ability to resist and so weakened that it could never, under any circumstances, threaten the region again.
This is more than the task that Trump set for the American military. This is the complete isolation of the regime, even if it survives. He turned everyone around him against himself. Now they hate him and will never forgive him. And this is the strengthening of the connection between the Jewish state and the Sunni world. That's about 1.2 billion people. So who is uniting them? The investor, the market, and the producer of goods and technologies. It's an amazing market for goods and technologies from the US and Israel. And this is a very big challenge for Russia and China. Even though Russia is currently receiving a lot of petrodollars, even so, that was NATO's position before Trump's threats.
We are not a party to the conflict, and therefore France will never take part in operations to open or liberate the Strait of Hormuz in the current context.
After that, Trump said, "I'm disappointed in NATO." It happened on March 16th. We spend billions on NATO. That's one of the reasons for our deficit, that we help other countries. And when they don't help us, that's definitely something we should seriously think about. After that, Europe stood on its hind legs. Europe crawled.
A new joint statement by Japan and other allies has appeared in which they signal their readiness to help ensure the security of shipping now through the Strait of Hormuz and to support efforts to stabilize global energy supplies. However, this contradicts what some of them said earlier.
Well, I don't want to say I told you so, but this is exactly what we predicted would happen. In fact, we'll proudly pat ourselves on the back for this, because now it seems America's allies in Europe and Asia are finally signaling their willingness to help with the Strait of Hormuz, just as Trump requested. Of course, this comes after a whole week of non-stop hype and panic about how, haha, the NATO countries told Trump no. He messed up so badly he's humiliated. America's allies are abandoning her, to which I said, that's never how this would end.
That is, those who were being protected supposedly told the one who was protecting them, "We're breaking off our alliance." I mean what? Ha, to shout, "I get it," to beat your chest like, "I'm Tarzan, you're Jane," or the other way around, "I'm Jane, you're Tarzan," and then hide behind someone's back and giggle like, We were just joking. We were just joking. We're such fools. They do that easily, by the way, because they need a master. And whether it's the USA or Russia or China or Islam, they don't care. They don't care. They need someone to keep them in line and protect them. And these are the remnants of once great empires. But who today remembers Syria, Babylon, Egypt, the great Roman Empire, or Carthage, or the Mongol Empire? The conquests of Genghis Khan? Well, someone read about it back in 4th grade in a history book. All of them, all these empires have one thing in common. They collapsed and disappeared without a trace. And in fact, almost without any memory of their achievements and deeds. I'm sure you'll be very interested to know that Mamdani's friend and ally was just arrested, and the court has ruled. Deportation.
A major political scandal has just shaken the socialist mayor of New York. And this happened at a time when one of his staff members received a deportation order from a judge. We will now see how not one but two scandals at once paint a picture of a mayor under siege. Both in his personal life, revealing deeply troubling sympathies at home, and in his political agenda, he is suffering humiliating defeats in court.
Mamdani is a friend of the people. Anyway, Mamdani just won't stay out of the news. At one point, he stated that he would rob not only the rich, but also ordinary people who have earnings and savings. If you saved money, it means you didn't need that money. This idea directly contradicts the American dogma, don't spend everything, save and invest.
We have a major scandal brewing that's literally shaking the administration of Zoran Mamdani, as it has come to light that his own wife, the First Lady of New York, has a tendency to celebrate the massacre of October 7th. Calling people the N-word and using homophobic slurs, as well as frequently posting her admiration for suicide bombers and hijackers. I'm not exaggerating, not one bit.
That is, the Democratic Party of the United States and their agents in the press covered for Mamdani so thoroughly that this only came to light after the elections. But I'll tell you this. Fanatical New Yorkers would have voted for anti-Semites, anti-Americans, jihadists, thieves, admirers, and child murderers who have surpassed Hitler's Germany in atrocities and brutality anyway. Well, 80 years after the end of World War II, people living in our world, in Western civilization, have started openly glorifying ovens, the slashing open of pregnant women's bellies, and beating elderly people and children with iron rods.
The New York City mayor.
New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani has found himself at the center of a growing scandal because of his 28-year-old Syrian-American wife, illustrator Rahma Davaji, after an investigation by the Washington Free Beacon, which used facial recognition technology to link her accounts. A very disturbing pattern of posts was discovered in her old X and Tumblr profiles. In 2017, she posted a photo of Layla Khaled, a member of the PFLP, which is recognized as a terrorist organization by the U.S., who carried out 2 airplane hijackings, repeating Khaled's own words, "If it benefits my cause, I will gladly accept death." On International Women's Day in 2015, she honored another woman, Shadia Abu Ghazaleh, another member of the Popular Front who blew up an Israeli bus, presenting her as a heroic resistance fighter.
Just to be clear, blowing up airplanes is considered heroism and courage, and killing people in a restaurant is seen as the height of dignity and honor. And this is the wife of the mayor of New York, who is called the First Lady of New York. Well, maybe that's what New York deserves.
On the same platform, she wrote that American troops, quote, "fighting in imperialist wars are not brave." And she accused American soldiers of, quote, "ruthlessly exterminating civilians in third world countries to maintain American hegemony," and separately accused, quote, "white people of creating Al-Qaeda." She stated that Tel Aviv should not exist and called its residents, quote, "occupiers," and in a 2013 publication, she casually used the N-word. This new report worsens the previous scandal in which Davaji was found to have liked Instagram posts glorifying the Hamas massacre on October 7, 2023 in real time.
While Hamas was killing, burning, and raping Israeli children, the wife of the mayor of New York, in an enthusiastic outburst, sent them congratulations and full support. Air kisses from an anti-Semite.
To top it off, Mamdani.
In addition to everything else, Mamdani and Douaji hosted activist Mahmoud Khalil, known for his support of Hamas, at Gracie Mansion. And Douaji also provided her illustrations for an essay by writer Susan Abulhawa, who has publicly compared Jews to cockroaches and vampires.
She said that Jews are like cockroaches and vampires. Apparently, Jews made matzah with the blood not only of peasant children, but also of Muslim children. I should note this is at the same time when Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and other Bahrains are preparing to fight side by side with Jews against fanatics from Iran. And ours, brought in from Syria, Afghanistan, and other Somalia's bastards, yes, bastards. And this, from my point of view, is still not really saying what I'd like to say about them. They are elected by idiot liberals to positions in the United States of America.
When he was confronted, Mayor Mamdani just brushed it off. He called his wife a private individual with no official role in his administration, but with each new revelation, this defense becomes more and more untenable. It goes without saying that this collected evidence paints a very troubling portrait of the First Lady of America's largest city, of someone who, by her own words and endorsements, praised recognized terrorists, welcomed mass atrocities, and approved of them. She dismissed documented war crimes as fake and also smeared American soldiers using racial slurs, on top of all that.
I mean, this lady, she doesn't like those black people. They are such an inferior race, but they can help her and her husband achieve their main goal of becoming very rich and very powerful. She has tons of envy towards white people. Probably as a girl, she wasn't accepted into some group she dreamed of joining. Usually this kind of hatred is rooted in little things like that.
Now, at the same time, the scandal surrounding his wife is not the only crisis that has hit Mayor Mamdani. He is also losing a very public battle with the Trump administration over immigration, the defining issue of his term. An immigration judge has officially ordered the deportation of Rubio Bajorquez, a 53-year-old Venezuelan citizen who worked as a data analyst in the New York City Council. This person, Ma'am Fakti. Danny and City Council Speaker Julie Menon have actively defended him as a law-abiding public servant facing unfair persecution. The Department of Homeland Security, of course, tells a completely different story. DHS has labeled Rubio Bajorquez a criminal, an illegal immigrant who entered the United States on a tourist visa back in 2017, was supposed to leave the country that same year, but overstayed his visa by almost 10 years. He didn't have a work permit, and he has a previous arrest for assault, despite the fact that he signed an official statement for his city council position claiming that he had never been arrested. Buddy.
Mamdani, well, okay, he's an illegal immigrant without work authorization. How was he hired if he couldn't work? Plus, he was arrested a few times for assault. He was arrested this time he was arrested during a raid, got busted, as they say. And Mamdani presented this case as a blatant violation of the rights of an American citizen who was arrested just because he was, Latino, a friend of Mamdani. And there were no other reasons, just to spite him. That's it. The mayor claimed that the arrested man had all the necessary documents, that his previous arrests were a lie, and that this was an attack on, you guessed it, democracy. Which means, for some reason, he likes democracy in this case, but when it comes to Hamas, he doesn't. And what happens next? Theoretically, of course, the mayor can be recalled, but the population of New York understands neither economics, nor politics, nor psychology. They're so brainwashed, they even brainwash themselves. Yes, that they would never vote to fire anyone who was against Trump and the Republicans. To them, Trump and the Republicans are the spawn of hell. I don't think I ever met such brainwashed people even in the Soviet Union. Well, maybe some soldiers, by the way, in the army, the ones they brought in from the villages, the ones they brought from the villages. And, you know, on Fridays during political briefings, they would say that things in America are even worse than here. But they just can't imagine how it could be any worse. So, for sure, that means America must be hell.
To understand why all of this seems so consistent, которая поддерживает террорист, a mayor who shelters criminal illegal immigrants from deportation, and this reflexive hostility toward American power, you need to understand the intellectual foundation that drives Zoran Mamdani and his wife, and this is what's known as Third World ideology. There's an excellent article by Zina Prabak from the Hudson Institute called The Logic of the Third World, which I highly recommend to all of you. And Prabak argues that Mamdani is not an Islamist as such, he's not a communist as such, but he represents something that the American political system has never encountered before. He is a politician entirely shaped by Third World post-colonial theory, so you might ask, what is that anyway, right? Well, post-colonial theory is a cultural Marxist ideology that originated in Paris, Algiers, and Havana. Of course, it originated in American graduate schools, and now it runs the largest city in the United States. It's a worldview that divides all of human reality into a single, unchanging moral dichotomy. That's the essence of all Marxist ideological movements, isn't it? They're always focused on the moral binary between the oppressor and the oppressed. However, for post-colonial thinkers of the Third World, this dichotomy is centered on the West and Western civilization, which are seen as the eternal oppressor. And anyone who opposes Western power, in their view, is inherently righteous.
That's what has always amazed me. Our liberals who seem to say they're for women's rights, and it does seem like they're really for women's rights, against racism, for spiritual freedom, immediately feel a kinship with Islamists who destroy women's rights. Absolute racists ban and punish any freedom, any absolute freedom, from how to dress to sexual preferences. And two, these groups feel perfectly comfortable in each other's embrace.
Zoran Mamdani didn't come out of nowhere. He is a product of decades of intellectual decay that I have personally witnessed in universities. And now he sits in Gracie Mansion wielding all the power of America's greatest city, while his wife's social media will tell you, Itse an di ki.
Everything you need to know about what they both really believe.
And here is perhaps the only, or maybe one of the very few Democrats, Senator Fetterman, who, let's say, doesn't think very highly of the behavior of Democratic leaders in the U.S.
Who do you think leads the Democratic Party today?
Who do you see as today's Democratic Party leader?
Oh, we don't have one. I think TDS, I think that's our leader right now. You know, right now our party is run by TDS. And now it's become almost impossible as a Democrat to agree that something is good or that I agree with the other side without being punished.
They are united by one thing, the persecution of President Trump. And I think partly that's because, well, President Trump is a unique politician who does what he says. He really did lower taxes just like he promised. He really did strengthen the border just like he said he would. He said, we will not allow Iran to obtain nuclear capability. Here is a man who does what he promised voters when he ran for office. We simply elected him, and he does what he said. I think that really upsets them. But yes, that's the only unifying principle, the principle that they have on the other side.
I'll add to that what Jim Jordan said. Yes, they are united by an animalistic hatred of Trump, but also by an animalistic fear of being exposed. And that's why they go mad, they hate, and they fight not just for life, but to the death. So that, as Fetterman said, Trump doesn't succeed at anything. And God willing, even if it's something really good for the country, they still hope it fails. That's why they oppose the voter ID law. Deportation of criminals, they try to protect them, to fight for them, even physically fight for them. Protecting the streets from criminals, they say you can't do that either. You can't protect them. That's why they want riots. They want looting, arson, fires in the streets. killing police officers, failures of Trump's international initiatives, anything at all, everything, anything as long as it makes things worse for him, for Trump. That's it. The whole of Ukraine is playing along with them, together with Zelensky. Western European leaders, too, professors at universities, and even liberal rabbis in Reform synagogues, who, in the name of God Yahweh, marry homosexuals and praise gender reassignment surgeries for children. I want you to understand. As long as they think this way and demand that everyone act like this, they are our enemies. Once again. As long as they think this way and demand that everyone act like this, they are our enemies. Even more than Al Capone ever was, than Al and other charming gangsters from Chicago, Washington, Los Angeles, and others, New York, and other good American cities. So, Europe crawled to kiss the ring. The Middle East is rallying under the banner of Israel. The Japanese have come bearing gifts. Russia and China are thumbing their noses menacingly, but they don't take their fists out of their pockets. Russia, however, did send oil to Cuba, pumping it into 2 tankers. Moscow wants to show that it can protect its supporters, or at the very least that it doesn't abandon them in times of trouble, as they say. But for Cuba, that's just a drop in the ocean, to put it mildly. It's enough to last a month or a month and a half while they try to negotiate something with the U.S. for their own benefit. Venezuela handed over its oil to be managed by the U.S. Mamdani's wife enthusiastically hates America, hates white people, and is insanely jealous. Mamdani is squirming like a worm on a hook. He's looking for money to keep his promises. But he can't succeed anywhere, except by stealing from the very people who supposedly voted for him. Although maybe those he's stealing from didn't vote for him. We don't know. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that everything else is magnificent. Everything else is wonderful, and so I wish you a marvelous, joyful, and amazing day. See you on the next stream. Goodbye.